The medical bay of the ISS Harmony hummed with the quiet efficiency of machines keeping David Chen alive. Tubes snaked from his motionless form, and monitors displayed the steady rhythm of a heart that refused to give up, even when everything else had failed. The accident in the asteroid mining sector had left him paralyzed from the neck down, his nervous system damaged beyond current human medical capabilities. The doctors had been honest, he would never walk again, never move his arms, never feel the simple pleasure of scratching an itch or holding a cup of coffee. Dr. Sarah Martinez checked his vitals for the third time that morning, her expression carefully neutral. She had seen many cases like David's during her 15 years practicing space medicine, but something about this particular patient troubled her. Maybe it was his age, only 28, with his whole life ahead of him. Maybe it was the way his eyes still burned with intelligence and determination despite his broken body. Or maybe it was the complete absence of visitors during his 3-month stay in the medical facility. "Any family coming to see you today, David?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. His parents had died in the climate wars of 2157, and he had no siblings. The mining company he worked for had paid his medical bills as required by law, but corporate representatives were hardly the same as loved ones. David's eyes tracked to her face. The neural interface allowed him to communicate through thought patterns translated into text on a screen, but the process was exhausting. "No," appeared on the display after a moment. "Same as always." Sarah nodded and made a note on her tablet. She was about to move to the next patient when alarms began blaring throughout the station. The lights shifted to emergency amber, and her comm device crackled to life with urgent chatter. Through the medical bay's viewport, she could see something that shouldn't exist, a ship of impossible design drifting silently toward their docking bay. The vessel defied every principle of human engineering. Its hull seemed to shimmer between dimensions, occasionally becoming transparent enough to see stars through what should have been solid matter. Organic curves flowed seamlessly into geometric precision, as if the ship had been grown rather than built. Most unsettling of all, it appeared to be completely unprotected against the vacuum of space, yet energy readings indicated a massive life sign aboard. Captain Rodriguez's voice echoed through the station's communication system. "All personnel to emergency stations. We have an unidentified vessel requesting docking permission. They claim to be on a diplomatic mission, but their technology is completely unknown to us." Sarah looked at David, whose eyes had widened with the first real interest she had seen from him in weeks. The neural interface displayed his thoughts. "What do you think it is?" Before she could answer, a new voice joined the calm channel, melodic, precise, and speaking perfect English despite clearly being non-human in origin. "Greetings, ISS Harmony. I am Ambassador Zira of the Ethereal Collective. I request permission to board your vessel. I seek an audience with the human designated David Chen." The medical bay fell silent except for the steady beeping of monitors. Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. In all her years of space medicine, she had never encountered alien life, despite humanity's expansion across dozens of star systems. The collective had been a myth, a story told by deep space miners who claimed to see impossible ships in the void between worlds. "How do they know your name?" Sarah whispered, but David's attention was fixed on the viewport where the alien ship continued its impossible dance through space. Captain Rodriguez's response was cautious but professional. "Ambassador Zira, this is Captain Elena Rodriguez. We are honored by your visit, but I must ask how you came to know of David Chen and why you seek an audience with him specifically." "David Chen's life pattern resonates across dimensional boundaries," came the reply. "His spirit burns bright despite his physical limitations. The collective has been watching humanity's expansion with great interest, and we believe David Chen represents the best of your species' potential." Sarah saw David's neural interface working overtime, thoughts flying across the screen too fast for her to read completely. She caught fragments. "Why me? Not possible. What do they want?" The docking procedure took nearly an hour, with the station's engineers working to adapt their systems to accommodate technology that seemed to operate on entirely different principles. When Ambassador Zira finally appeared in the medical bay, Sarah understood why the voice had seemed so melodic. The alien stood nearly 7 feet tall, with a humanoid form that seemed to be carved from living starlight. Her skin shifted between deep purple and silver, and patterns of bioluminescence pulsed along her elongated limbs in hypnotic rhythms. Her face was delicate and angular, with large eyes that held depths of intelligence Sarah could barely comprehend. Most remarkably, she seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Sarah could swear she saw the same figure from slightly different angles no matter where she stood. "David Chen," Zira said, her voice creating harmonics that seemed to resonate in Sarah's bones. "I have traveled far to meet you." David's neural interface remained blank for several moments before text appeared. "I don't understand. Why me? I'm nobody special. I can't even move." Zira glided closer to his bed, her form casting impossible shadows that moved independently of her body. "Your physical form is temporary and limited, David Chen. Your consciousness is what caught our attention. In your darkest moment, when your body failed you, your mind expanded. You touched the edges of dimensions we have studied for millennia." Sarah found herself leaning forward despite her professional training. "What do you mean? What happened to him?" "During his accident," Zira explained, turning those otherworldly eyes to Sarah, "David Chen's consciousness was briefly separated from his physical form. For 17 minutes and 43 seconds, his awareness existed in the quantum foam that underlies reality. Most beings would have been destroyed by such exposure. David Chen adapted." The neural interface blazed to life with David's thoughts. "I remember something. During the surgery, I was floating, watching them work on my body. But I was also somewhere else. Somewhere with music made of mathematics and colors that don't exist. The ethereal collective exists partially in that space," Zira continued. "We are beings who transcended physical limitation millennia ago, but, in doing so, we lost something precious, the ability to experience reality through biological senses, to feel the weight of mortality that gives life meaning. You, David Chen, have the potential to bridge both worlds." Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm system. "Ambassador, with respect, what exactly are you proposing?" Zira's patterns of bioluminescence shifted to what Sarah somehow recognized as deep contemplation. "The collective wishes to offer David Chen a choice. We can restore his physical form using our biodimensional technology, granting him abilities far beyond normal human parameters. In exchange, he would serve as an ambassador between our species, helping to establish formal relations between the collective and humanity." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "What's the catch?" "There's always a catch. The enhancement process would require David Chen to leave Earth permanently. The quantum alterations necessary to repair his nervous system would make him incompatible with purely biological environments. He would need to live aboard collective vessels or specially modified facilities." The room fell silent except for the steady rhythm of life support systems. Sarah watched David's face, seeing emotions play across his features that the neural interface couldn't capture. Hope warred with fear, excitement with uncertainty. Finally, text appeared on the screen. "Would I still be human?" "You would be more than human," Zira replied. "But the core of what makes David Chen unique would remain unchanged. Your memories, your personality, your capacity for growth and wonder, these would be enhanced, not replaced." Sarah found herself speaking before she realized what she was doing. "How do we know you're telling the truth? How do we know this isn't some elaborate form of alien experimentation?" Zira turned to face her fully, and Sarah felt as though she was being examined by an intelligence vast beyond her comprehension. "Dr. Sarah Martinez, you have dedicated your life to healing others, often at great personal cost. You have never married, have no children, because you believe your calling is to ease suffering wherever you find it. You ask this question not from suspicion, but from care for your patient." The accuracy of the assessment sent chills down Sarah's spine. She had never discussed her personal life with anyone on the station, yet this alien being seemed to know her deepest motivations. "I offer proof through demonstration," Zira continued, extending one of her luminescent hands toward David. "I can temporarily restore sensation to his body for 1 hour. If he chooses to proceed with the full enhancement, the change will be permanent. If not, he will return to his current state, and I will depart." Sarah looked at David, whose neural interface displayed a single word: "Yes." Wait, Sarah said, her medical training overriding her amazement. What are the risks? What could go wrong? The primary risk is rejection, Zira explained. David Chen's consciousness would need to successfully integrate with collective biotechnology. Failure would result in complete neural shutdown death, in terms you would understand. However, my analysis suggests a 94.7% probability of success. The numbers were better than most of the surgeries Sarah performed on a daily basis, but the permanent consequences were unlike anything in human experience. David, you need to think about this carefully. Once you make this choice, there's no going back. More text appeared on the neural interface. Dr. Martinez, what life do I have to go back to? I can't move, can't feel anything below my neck, can't contribute anything meaningful to the world. At least this way, I might be able to help establish contact between our species. Maybe my accident happened for a reason. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes despite her professional composure. She had seen many patients face impossible choices, but never one with such far-reaching implications for the entire human race. The choice must be made freely, Zira said, her voice somehow conveying deep respect for the gravity of the moment. And it must be made now. The dimensional alignments necessary for the procedure occur only once every 847 of your Earth years. If David Chen chooses to proceed, I will begin the temporary restoration immediately. Captain Rodriguez's voice came through the comm system again. David, the entire station is watching. Whatever you decide, you have our support. Sarah watched David's eyes close for a long moment. When they opened again, the neural interface displayed a message that would change everything. I accept your offer, Ambassador Zira. I'm ready to begin. Zira's bioluminescent patterns shifted to what Sarah somehow understood was profound joy mixed with ceremonial solemnity. Then, let us begin the first stage of your transformation, David Chen. In 1 hour, you will either take your first steps toward a new form of existence, or your last journey will begin. Either way, you will not face it alone. The alien being placed her luminescent hand on David's forehead, and the medical bay filled with light that existed in spectrums human eyes had never been designed to see. Sarah felt reality itself shifting around them, as if the universe was holding its breath to witness what would happen next. As the light intensified, Sarah realized she was about to witness either the greatest breakthrough in human history or its most tragic mistake. Either way, David Chen was about to discover what lay beyond the boundaries of human limitation and whether the cost of transcendence was worth the price of leaving everything familiar behind. The transformation had begun, and there would be no turning back. David's body began to convulse as energy flowed through neural pathways that had been dead for months. The monitors screamed warnings as his vital signs spiked beyond normal parameters, but Zira's presence somehow stabilized the chaos. Sarah watched in fascination and terror as the impossible became reality before her eyes. For the first time in 3 months, David Chen felt his fingers twitch and knew his life would never be the same again. The sensation returned to David's body like fire racing through dead circuits. After months of existing as a consciousness trapped in paralyzed flesh, the sudden flood of feeling was almost unbearable. Every nerve ending screamed to life, sending signals his brain had forgotten how to process. Pain and pleasure merged into a symphony of sensation that brought tears streaming down his face. Easy, David Chen, Zira's melodic voice cut through the chaos. Her luminescent hand remained pressed to his forehead, somehow anchoring his consciousness as his nervous system rewired itself. Your neural pathways are remembering their purpose. The discomfort will pass. Sarah watched the monitors in amazement as David's brain activity spiked to levels she had never seen in any human patient. Yet somehow, his vital signs remained stable despite the massive neural upheaval. Whatever Zira was doing went far beyond any medical technology humanity possessed. Can you feel this? Sarah asked, gently touching David's arm. For the first time in 3 months, his eyes tracked to the point of contact and he gasped. I can feel everything, David whispered, his voice hoarse from disuse. The neural interface had gone dark, he no longer needed it to communicate. The sheets against my skin, the air circulating in the room, even the vibrations from the station's engines. It's like I'd been deaf and blind and, suddenly, I can see and hear again. Zira's pattern shifted to what Sarah was beginning to recognize as satisfaction mixed with careful monitoring. Your nervous system is integrating with collective biotechnology. The nanoscale organisms we introduced are mapping every damaged pathway and creating quantum bridges to restore function.
This is only the beginning.
As the hour progressed, David's transformation became more apparent. He could sit up without assistance, move his arms with increasing coordination, and even take a few tentative steps around the medical bay. But, more remarkable were the subtle changes that registered on Sarah's instruments. His reaction time was 3 times faster than human normal, his sensory processing showed impossible acuity, and brain scans revealed neural activity in regions that typically remain dormant. "This is incredible," Sarah murmured, reviewing the data streaming from her sensors. "David, you're not just healed, you're enhanced beyond anything I've ever seen." David paused in his exploration of restored mobility to look at his hands. They appeared perfectly normal, but he could see the subtle energy patterns flowing beneath his skin like veins of liquid starlight.
"I can sense the electromagnetic fields from all the equipment in this room. I can feel the quantum fluctuations in the air itself. It's like discovering I've been living in a flat painting and, suddenly, stepping into 3 dimensions. The full enhancement would expand these capabilities exponentially," Zira explained.
"What you experience now is merely a preview of what the collective can offer."
"But, David Chen, the hour approaches its end.
You must choose now whether to proceed with permanent transformation." The temporary nature of his restoration hit David like a physical blow. Already, he could feel the sensations beginning to fade at the edges, the enhanced perceptions growing dimmer. The thought of returning to his paralyzed state after experiencing such profound capability was almost unbearable.
"If I choose the full enhancement," he asked, "what exactly will I become?"
Zira moved closer, her multi-dimensional form casting patterns of light that seemed to exist in spaces Sarah's eyes couldn't quite follow. "You would become humanity's first dimensional ambassador. Your consciousness would span multiple reality layers simultaneously, allowing you to perceive and interact with aspects of existence that purely biological beings cannot access. You would retain your human memories and personality, but gain the ability to exist in environments that would destroy normal matter." Sarah felt compelled to voice the question that had been nagging at her since the demonstration began.
"What about the collective? What do you really get out of this arrangement?"
The alien being turned those otherworldly eyes to Sarah, and, for a moment, she sensed something unexpected in that vast intelligence: loneliness. "Dr. Martinez, the collective has existed for over 10 million years.
We have transcended physical limitation, conquered death, explored realities beyond imagination.
But, in our transcendence, we lost the capacity for surprise, for growth through struggle, for the unique perspective that comes from mortal experience." "You're using David as a bridge to reconnect with mortality," Sarah realized.
"Not using," Zira corrected gently. "Partnering.
David Chen would become our ambassador to humanity, yes, but, equally important, he would be humanity's ambassador to us. Through his enhanced consciousness, we would rediscover what we sacrificed in our evolution beyond physical form. And, through our guidance, humanity would take its first steps toward joining the greater community of dimensional civilizations." David had been listening to this exchange while testing the limits of his temporary abilities. He found he could sense the conversation happening on the bridge several decks away, feel the thoughts and emotions of every human on the station like distant music. The scope of enhanced awareness was intoxicating. "What happens to Earth if I accept?" he asked.
"What happens to humanity?"
"That would depend largely on you," Zira replied. "As dimensional ambassador, your primary role would be to evaluate humanity's readiness for contact with the greater galactic community."
"Many species exist among the stars, David Chen. Some are benevolent, others are not.
Humanity is currently isolated by its limited dimensional awareness, but that isolation is also protection." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine.
"You're saying there are hostile alien species out there?"
"The universe is vast and contains every form of consciousness imaginable," Zira confirmed. "The collective serves as guardians and guides for emerging species, helping them navigate the dangerous transition from single-planet civilization to galactic awareness."
"But we can only do so much. Each species must ultimately choose its own path. And if humanity isn't ready?"
David asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer.
Then, the protection remains in place until readiness is achieved. But, David Chen, isolation cannot last forever. Eventually, humanity will attract the attention of less benevolent species. When that happens, it would be better to have allies and enhanced capabilities rather than facing the unknown alone. The weight of responsibility settled on David's shoulders like a physical burden. The choice wasn't just about his own future, it was about the future of his entire species. And he had less than 15 minutes to make a decision that would echo through history. Dr. Martinez, he said, turning to Sarah, what would you do in my position? Sarah had been dreading this question, but she had also been preparing for it. David, I've spent my entire career helping people make impossible choices about their lives and health. The one thing I've learned is that you can't make decisions based on fear of what might go wrong. You have to look at the potential for what could go right. She gestured toward the viewport where Zira's ship continued its impossible dance through space. Look at what we've learned just from this one encounter. Imagine what humanity could achieve with access to collective knowledge and technology. Yes, there are risks, but there are also opportunities beyond anything we've ever imagined. But I'd be giving up any chance of a normal human life, David pointed out. Were you going to have that anyway? Sarah asked gently. David, your accident took away your mobility, but it didn't take away your mind or your spirit. This enhancement would give you capabilities beyond anything any human has ever possessed. You could explore dimensions of reality we can't even conceive of. You could be part of humanity's first steps toward joining something infinitely larger than ourselves. David looked down at his hands again, watching the fading patterns of energy beneath his skin. Already, the enhanced sensations were dimming as the temporary modifications began to break down. In a few minutes, he would be back to his paralyzed state, dependent on machines for survival and neural interfaces for communication. Ambassador Zira, he said finally, if I accept the enhancement, would I be able to visit Earth again? In time, yes, she replied. Once your transformation is complete and you have learned to control your enhanced abilities, you could return to Earth for brief periods. However, your primary existence would need to be in dimensional space or aboard properly equipped vessels. What about relationships with other humans? Could I maintain friendships, connections to my species? Zira's pattern shifted to something that might have been compassion. Enhanced consciousness brings both gifts and isolation, David Chen. You would be able to communicate with humans, but the gulf in perception and capability would grow over time. Most of your meaningful relationships would likely be with other dimensional beings, collective members, and, eventually, other enhanced humans. The honesty of her answer was both refreshing and terrifying. David appreciated that she wasn't sugarcoating the consequences of his choice, but the prospect of fundamental isolation from his own species was daunting. How many other humans have you made this offer to? He asked. You are the first, Zira admitted. The collective has been observing humanity for several centuries, waiting for an individual with the right combination of mental resilience, dimensional sensitivity, and personal motivation to accept such a transformation. Your accident created the precise conditions necessary for consciousness expansion. Sarah found herself speaking again, though she hadn't planned to intervene further. David, millions of people live full lives despite physical limitations. But how many get the chance to literally transcend human limitation entirely? This isn't just about healing your paralysis, it's about becoming something new. Time grows short, Zira announced, though her tone remained patient. The dimensional alignment that allows for permanent enhancement will pass in 6 minutes. David Chen, what is your choice? David closed his eyes and reached out with his temporarily enhanced senses one final time. He could feel the vast consciousness of the collective beyond Zira, ancient minds that held the accumulated wisdom of millions of years. He could sense the fear and hope of every human on the station as they waited to learn what he would decide. Most powerfully, he could feel the infinite potential stretching out before him, not just for personal transformation, but for everything his choice might make possible for his species. When he opened his eyes, David Chen had made his decision. I accept the full enhancement, he said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was choosing. I want to become humanity's dimensional ambassador. Zira's entire form blazed with light that seemed to exist in spectrums beyond visible perception. Then, let us begin your true transformation, David Chen. What follows will change you in ways you cannot yet imagine, but the core of who you are will remain intact. Are you ready to step beyond the boundaries of human existence? David looked at Sarah one final time, seeing tears of pride and loss warring in her eyes. Then, he turned back to Zira and nodded. I'm ready, he said. Let's make history. The alien ambassador began to glow with an intensity that filled the medical bay with impossible radiance. As the light enveloped David's form, Sarah realized she was witnessing the birth of something entirely new, the first human to voluntarily transcend the limitations of mortal flesh and join the vast community of beings that existed beyond the boundaries of normal reality. Whatever David Chen became in the minutes that followed, he would never again be merely human. And, in making that choice, he had opened a door between worlds that could never be closed. The second phase of transformation had begun, and, with it, humanity's first tentative step toward a larger universe filled with wonders and terrors beyond imagination. The transformation was unlike anything David had imagined possible. Where the temporary restoration had been gentle, this process was a complete reconstruction of his being at the quantum level. Energy flowed through him like molten starlight, rewriting his DNA, restructuring his nervous system, and expanding his consciousness into dimensions that human language had no words to describe. Sarah watched in fascination and terror as David's body became translucent, revealing patterns of energy that pulsed in harmony with Zira's own bioluminescence. His form flickered between solid matter and something that existed partially in parallel dimensions. The medical monitors couldn't track his vital signs anymore. They showed impossible readings that suggested his heart was beating in multiple temporal states simultaneously. The integration is proceeding successfully, Zira announced, though her voice now seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. David Chen's consciousness is adapting to multidimensional existence far more readily than our projections suggested. His human tenacity is serving him well. Through the viewports, Sarah could see other collective vessels appearing from nowhere, or perhaps from dimensions that her three-dimensional perspective couldn't properly perceive. The ships surrounded the ISS Harmony in a formation that was clearly protective rather than threatening, but their presence emphasized the magnitude of what was happening in the medical bay. How long will this take? Sarah asked, though she was no longer sure if her voice was reaching Zira through normal sound waves or some other form of communication. Time flows differently during dimensional integration, came the reply. From your perspective, perhaps 30 more minutes. From David Chen's experience, he is living through what feels like centuries of existence as his consciousness learns to navigate quantum reality. Sarah could barely make out David's features anymore through the cascade of energy surrounding him, but she caught glimpses of his face that suggested he was experiencing something beyond wonder, a joy so profound it was almost painful to witness. Whatever he was seeing and feeling during the transformation was clearly magnificent beyond human comprehension. Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled through the communication system with barely controlled panic. All hands to emergency stations. We have multiple unidentified vessels approaching at high velocity. They're not responding to our hail attempts, and their technology profile doesn't match the collective ships. Through the viewport, Sarah saw sleek black vessels emerge from what appeared to be tiers in space itself. Unlike the organic beauty of collective technology, these ships were angular and predatory, bristling with weapon systems that radiated malevolent energy even to her untrained eye. Zira's form suddenly blazed with urgent light. Marauders! They must have detected the dimensional resonance of David Chen's transformation. The Void Seekers are drawn to consciousness expansion events like predators to blood in water. Are we in danger? Sarah asked, though the answer seemed obvious from the way the station's defensive systems were powering up. Extreme danger, Zira confirmed. The Void Seekers consume consciousness itself, growing stronger with each mind they devour. A newly enhanced being like David Chen would be an irresistible prize. The collective ships will defend the station, but if the Marauders breach our perimeter. She didn't need to finish the threat. Sarah could see the alien weapons charging, energy building to levels that would vaporize the entire station in seconds. The collective vessels moved to intercept, but they were outnumbered 3-1. Can't you stop the transformation and get David to safety? Sarah asked desperately. The integration has passed the point of no return, Zira replied.
To interrupt the process now would destroy David Chen's consciousness entirely.
He must complete the enhancement, or he will die.
The first exchange of weapon fire lit up the void around them with energies that existed in spectrums Sarah's eyes weren't designed to see. The collective ships fought with weapons that seemed to bend space itself, while the Marauders responded with beams of concentrated entropy that aged whatever they touched by millennia in seconds. Through it all, David's transformation continued. His form had become almost entirely energy now, connected to his original physical shape by threads of consciousness that Zira somehow helped maintain. Sarah could feel waves of power emanating from him as his enhancement reached critical stages. "There," Zira said with sudden satisfaction.
David Chen has achieved stable multidimensional consciousness. The final integration begins now.
The energy surrounding David suddenly collapsed inward, condensing into a form that was recognizably human but clearly much more. When the light faded, he stood before them transformed beyond recognition yet somehow still fundamentally himself. His skin held a subtle luminescence that shifted with his thoughts, his eyes contained depths that seemed to hold entire galaxies, and his presence radiated an authority that made Sarah instinctively want to defer to his judgment. "I can see them," David said, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated in dimensions beyond sound.
"The Marauders.
They're not just trying to capture me, they're planning to use my enhanced consciousness as a weapon against Earth itself." He moved to the viewport with fluid grace that defied physics, his enhanced form casting impossible shadows that moved independently of the light sources. Sarah watched in amazement as he placed his hand against the transparent aluminum, and, suddenly, she could see what he was seeing: tactical displays that showed the true scope of the battle raging around them. "The collective ships are powerful, but they're built for exploration and defense," David continued, his expanded awareness processing information at superhuman speeds. "The Marauders specialize in consciousness warfare. If they capture me, they can use my connection to humanity to create a mental bridge that would let them drain the life force from every human in the solar system." "Then, we have to get you away from here," Sarah said urgently. "No," David replied, and Sarah felt the absolute certainty in his voice.
"Running won't solve anything.
They'll just follow, and, next time there might not be collective ships to help defend against them. This is exactly the kind of situation I was enhanced to handle." Zira's pattern shifted to what Sarah recognized as deep concern.
"David Chen, you have been enhanced for mere minutes. You do not yet have full control over your new capabilities.
Engaging the Marauders in consciousness warfare would be extremely dangerous."
"Maybe," David acknowledged. "But I have something they don't expect. I still remember what it's like to be human.
I know how humans think, how we fight when our backs are against the wall. They see an enhanced being, but they don't understand that the human part of me is what makes me dangerous." Another explosion rocked the station as a Marauder weapon broke through the collective defenses and scored a hit on the ISS Harmony's outer hull. Emergency systems activated, sealing breaches and rerouting power, but Sarah could tell they wouldn't survive many more direct hits. "What's your plan?" she asked David, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer.
David turned from the viewport, and Sarah gasped at the transformation in his features. His enhanced consciousness was fully active now, processing information from multiple dimensions simultaneously. She could see calculations flowing behind his eyes like living mathematics, strategies forming and discarding themselves faster than human thought could follow. "I'm going to do something that no purely logical being would ever attempt," he said with a smile that was both completely human and utterly alien. "I'm going to challenge their entire fleet to single combat."
"That's suicide," Sarah protested. "No," David replied, his consciousness already reaching out beyond the confines of the station to touch the minds of the Marauder commanders.
"That's human stubbornness applied to multidimensional warfare. They want to capture an enhanced human consciousness? Fine. Let them try to take one that's willing to fight back."
Before either Sarah or Zira could stop him, David's enhanced form began to shift. His consciousness expanded beyond his physical body, projecting itself into the quantum foam that surrounded the battle. Suddenly, every screen on the station flickered to life with his image, not just visual, but a presence that seemed to speak directly to the mind of everyone watching. "Attention Marauder fleet," his voice boomed across all communication frequencies, enhanced by his newfound abilities to resonate in dimensions beyond normal electromagnetic spectrum.
This is David Chen, Dimensional Ambassador and Enhanced Human Consciousness. You want to harvest human awareness? Come and take it.
The response was immediate. The Marauder ships ceased their attacks on the collective vessels and turned their attention entirely to the station where David waited. Sarah could see energy signatures building on every enemy vessel as they prepared weapons designed specifically for consciousness warfare. "They're taking the bait," David said, his physical form now crackling with energy as he prepared for battle.
"Zira, I need you to do something for me." "Anything within my power, David Chen.
If this goes wrong, if they somehow manage to capture or destroy my consciousness, I need you to make sure Dr. Martinez gets back to Earth safely. She needs to tell humanity what happened here, help them prepare for what's coming." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as she realized what David was planning.
"You're not just challenging them to single combat, you're offering yourself as a sacrifice to keep them away from Earth." "I'm offering myself as a weapon they're not prepared to face," David corrected.
"The Marauders have fought enhanced beings before, but never one who chose enhancement to protect others rather than to escape human limitation. They understand predator consciousness, prey consciousness, even transcendent consciousness. But they've never encountered sacrifice consciousness backed by multidimensional capabilities. The first wave of Marauder consciousness weapons struck the station, energy that sought to tear awareness itself from living minds. The attack would have left every human aboard the ISS Harmony as mindless shells, their consciousness devoured to feed alien hunger. Instead, the assault crashed against David's expanded awareness like waves against an unbreakable shore.
"My turn," David said grimly.
What followed was a battle fought in dimensions that human perception could barely comprehend. David's consciousness, enhanced by collective technology but guided by purely human determination, struck back at the Marauders with strategies they had never encountered. Where they expected predatory aggression or defensive resistance, they found something entirely different: protective fury backed by the absolute refusal to let harm come to those under his care. Sarah watched through the viewports as the battle raged in spaces between spaces, energy exchanges that occasionally spilled into normal reality as flashes of impossible color and geometry that hurt to look at directly. Through it all, David's physical form remained in the medical bay, but she could sense that his true self was fighting across multiple dimensions simultaneously.
"He's winning," Zira announced with what sounded like amazement.
"The Marauders are retreating.
David Chen's consciousness is proving more resilient and adaptable than their weapons were designed to handle."
One by one, the Marauder vessels began to withdraw, tearing holes in space to escape to whatever dark dimensions they called home. But their retreat wasn't driven by military defeat, it was something far more profound. David had shown them something they couldn't comprehend or counter: the power of consciousness that chose transcendence not for personal gain, but to protect others. As the last Marauder ship vanished into quantum foam, David's consciousness snapped back to his physical form with enough force to shake the entire medical bay. He collapsed to his knees, energy still crackling around him as his enhanced nervous system struggled to process what he had just experienced. "It's over," he gasped, looking up at Sarah with eyes that held depths of experience no human had ever possessed.
"They're gone. And they won't come back anytime soon.
They've never encountered a consciousness willing to sacrifice transcendence to protect mortality."
It confused them enough to make them retreat and reconsider their strategies.
Sarah knelt beside him, careful not to touch his energy-charged form but desperate to offer some kind of comfort.
"Are you all right? What did that cost you?"
"Everything and nothing," David replied with a tired smile. "I used up most of my stored enhancement energy in that battle. I'll need months of recovery time before I'm ready to take on full ambassador duties. But, Sarah, I proved something important today."
"What's that?" "Human consciousness enhanced by alien technology doesn't become alien consciousness.
It becomes something new, something that combines the best of both evolutionary paths. The Marauders couldn't understand how enhanced awareness could still be motivated by protection of the weak rather than consumption of the strong." Zira approached them both, her patterns now showing deep respect mixed with what might have been affection.
"David Chen, what you accomplished today will be remembered by the collective for millennia to come. You have proven that humanity is ready to begin its journey toward galactic citizenship." "What happens now?" Sarah asked.
Now, the real work begins, David replied, slowly getting back to his feet as his energy levels stabilized.
I need to learn to fully control my enhanced abilities. The collective will teach me to navigate multidimensional reality safely.
And, eventually, I'll return to Earth as humanity's first ambassador to the galactic community.
Will you be able to maintain relationships with humans? Sarah asked, echoing the question that had troubled her since the transformation began.
David considered this carefully, his enhanced consciousness already running probability analyses on the social implications of his new existence.
I'll be different, yes. But I'll still be human at my core.
And, Sarah, what happened here today proves that the human part of me, the part that values connection and protection of others, isn't a weakness to be transcended.
It's a strength to be enhanced.
He turned to look out at the stars, where collective ships continued their graceful patrol around the station. The universe is vast and full of wonders and dangers beyond imagination.
Humanity is about to take its first steps into that larger community.
It won't be easy, and there will be challenges that test everything we believe about ourselves and our place in existence. But we'll face those challenges together, Sarah said, understanding flooding through her. Enhanced humans and baseline humans, working as partners rather than as separate species.
Exactly, David confirmed.
I chose transcendence not to escape humanity, but to serve it better. That choice changed me, but it didn't erase who I am.
And that might be the key to everything that comes next.
6 months later, Dr. Sarah Martinez stood in the observation deck of Earth's first dimensional embassy, watching David Chen, now officially Ambassador Chen, demonstrate multidimensional navigation techniques to a group of human scientists and engineers. He moved through spacetime like a dancer, his enhanced form existing simultaneously in multiple dimensions while his consciousness remained firmly anchored to his human identity. The changes in him were obvious. His awareness spanned light years, his capabilities included manipulation of quantum reality itself, and his lifespan would now be measured in millennia rather than decades. But, when he laughed at a joke or showed concern for a colleague's well-being, Sarah could still see the same man who had made the choice to sacrifice his purely human existence for the greater good of his species.
Any regrets? She asked during one of his rare breaks from diplomatic duties. David paused in his review of interdimensional trade proposals to consider her question seriously. About accepting the enhancement? Never. About the isolation from normal human experience? Sometimes.
But, Sarah, look what we've accomplished. He gestured toward the viewport where Earth hung in the void, now surrounded by a protective network of human collective cooperative stations. First contact had led to technology exchanges that were already solving humanity's energy crisis and opening up new frontiers for exploration. More importantly, Earth's entrance into the galactic community had been guided by someone who understood both the potential and the dangers that awaited. The Marauders haven't returned, he continued. 3 other species have requested formal diplomatic contact through collective channels. And, next month, we're expecting the arrival of the first group of human volunteers for consciousness enhancement training. Not full transformation like mine, but enough expansion to create a diplomatic corps capable of interacting with truly alien minds.
Sarah smiled as she watched him work.
The title of his story had proven prophetic in ways none of them could have anticipated.
Standing by his bed, Ambassador Zira had indeed given up her entire world's policy of non-interference to pick David as humanity's bridge to the stars.
But David had given up just as much, trading his purely human existence for the chance to serve as guardian and guide for his species' first steps into galactic civilization. The best part, David added, returning to his diplomatic correspondence while maintaining their conversation across multiple dimensional levels, is that I get to help write humanity's next chapter.
And I have a feeling it's going to be the greatest story ever told.
Outside the embassy's windows, ships from a dozen different species moved through space in patterns that would have been impossible before David's sacrifice and transformation. The universe was vast and full of wonders beyond imagination, and humanity was finally ready to explore it all, guided by someone who had chosen to transcend human limitation, not to escape his species, but to serve it better than any purely human consciousness ever could. The enhancement had cost David Chen his normal human life, but, in return, he had gained the ability to shepherd his entire species toward a future among the stars. And, as Sarah watched him work, she knew with absolute certainty that he would never consider that anything less than the greatest bargain in human history. The transformation was complete, the future was bright, and David Chen had proven that human consciousness enhanced was still human consciousness, just powerful enough to protect everything he held dear.